The first time I heard that my parents had been telling people I disappeared, I was standing less than 20 feet away from them. My mother was smiling at a family friend and saying, "We haven't heard from her in years." I almost laughed. Because for 4 years, I had been sending them money every single month. They knew exactly where I was. They just didn't know I had finally stopped paying for the lie they called family. My name is Rachel Morgan, and for most of my adult life, I believed being a good daughter meant making sacrifices without asking questions. My parents, David and Elaine, raised me in a small town where everyone knew everyone else's business. Dad was 61, proud, stubborn, and obsessed with appearances. Mom was 59, warm when things went her way but surprisingly cold when they didn't. I was their oldest child. My younger brother, Ryan, was 28. And Ryan had always been the one who needed help. When he was 16, my parents bought him an expensive computer. When he was 18, they paid for his car. When he was 21, they helped him start a small delivery business. When I asked why he always seemed to receive more than I did, Dad would smile and say, "You're responsible. Ryan needs us." I believed him. Then I got my first real job in another city. I was 24. My salary wasn't huge, but it was enough to rent a small apartment and live comfortably. 3 months after I moved, Mom called. "Rachel, we need a little help." "How much?" "Just $400. I sent it. The next month, she asked again. Then again. Soon, 400 became 600. 600 became 800. Eventually, I was sending nearly $1,500 every month. I convinced myself it was temporary. My parents said the house needed repairs. Then Dad said his business had slowed down. Then Ryan needed help. Then Mom had medical bills. There was always a reason. And because I loved them, I never questioned it. But I did notice something strange. Whenever I visited, my parents had new furniture. A new television. New appliances. Ryan somehow had money for weekend trips. When I asked about it, Mom would say, "Don't worry about little things." I should have worried. One evening, I called Mom after sending another payment. "Are you sure everything is okay?" "Of course. Because I can barely save anything." There was silence. Then she said something that I still remember. "You're young. You can always make more money." I stared at my bank account. I had less than $200 left until payday. I swallowed. Right. That was the beginning of the end. A few months later, I met Daniel. He was 32, calm, patient, and completely different from my family. When he learned how much money I sent home, he didn't tell me to stop. He simply asked one question. "Do they ever ask how you're doing?" I didn't understand. "What do you mean? When they call, do they ask about you?" I thought about it. "No." "Do they ask if you're happy?" I shook my head. "No." "Do they ever tell you they're proud of you?" I couldn't answer. Daniel didn't say anything else. But his question stayed with me. Then, one Friday night, Mom called in tears. "Rachel, Ryan made a terrible mistake." My stomach dropped. What happened? "He borrowed money from the wrong people." "How much?" $20,000. I sat up. $20,000? He needs us. I closed my eyes. "Mom, I don't have that kind of money." "You have savings." "I don't." "Rachel. I've been sending you money for years." She became quiet. Then she said, "You're his sister." Something inside me finally broke. "I am also your daughter." She hung up. The next morning, I checked my bank account. I realized I had sent my parents more than $70,000 over 4 years. $70,000. And I had almost nothing to show for it. I called Dad. "Where has all my money gone?" His voice became defensive. What are you accusing us of? I'm asking. We used it for the family. What does that mean? It means you helped your family. I felt tears forming. Did you use my money for Ryan? Dad didn't answer. That was answer enough. I told them I was done. No more money. No more emergency payments. No more excuses. Dad's voice turned cold. If you abandon your family when we need you, don't expect us to welcome you back. I hung up. That was the last time I spoke to them for nearly 4 years. At first, I expected endless calls. There were a few. Then silence. I built a life. Daniel and I eventually married. We bought a small house. I started a new job. For the first time, I saved money without feeling guilty. I thought about my parents often. I wondered whether they were okay. I wondered whether Ryan had changed. But I didn't contact them. Then, for years after that final phone call, I received an invitation. It wasn't from my parents. It was from my aunt, Margaret. A family reunion. I almost threw it away. But something made me go. I hadn't seen most of my relatives in years. When I arrived, I immediately noticed something strange. People stared at me. Some whispered. One cousin hugged me tightly. Oh my goodness, Rachel. You're alive. I pulled back. What? She looked embarrassed. I didn't mean. What did you mean? She lowered her voice. Your parents told everyone you disappeared. My stomach dropped. What? She hesitated. They said you left without saying goodbye. I couldn't breathe. They said I disappeared? She nodded. 4 years. I looked across the room. And there they were. My parents. Standing beside the dessert table. My mother saw me. Her face went white. Then she whispered something to Dad. They walked toward me. Mom looked like she had seen a ghost. Rachel? I smiled. Hi, Mom. She hugged me. I stood completely still. You're really here. I pulled away. You told everyone I disappeared. Her expression changed. That's not what we meant. Then what did you mean? Dad stepped in. You stopped contacting us. I stared at him. You knew exactly why. He looked around. Not here. I laughed softly. Why not? You told everyone your version. People had begun listening. Mom grabbed my arm. Please. I pulled it away. No. Then came the first twist. My Aunt Margaret stepped forward. David, maybe you should tell Rachel what you told me. Dad froze. What are you talking about? Margaret looked at me. Your father told me you hadn't sent money home in years. I stared at Dad. He had lied about that too. He had told everyone I abandoned them. But he had also told relatives that I had never supported the family financially. I felt something inside me go cold. Why? Dad didn't answer. Mom started crying. Then Ryan walked into the room. He looked completely different. Older. Tired. And angry. He stared at me. Rachel. I turned toward him. Ryan. He swallowed. I owe you the truth. My heart started pounding. What truth? He looked at our parents. Then back at me. Most of the money you sent wasn't for the house. I already knew. But hearing it from him still hurt. Where did it go? He hesitated. Mom and Dad used it to pay off my business debts. I closed my eyes. Then Ryan said the words that changed everything. They also told me you knew. I opened my eyes. What? They told me you wanted to help me. I looked at my parents. My mother began shaking her head. That isn't. Ryan continued. They said you were proud of me. I felt sick. They had used my love for my brother to make him believe I had willingly sacrificed everything. He looked devastated. I thought you were okay with it. I stared at him. I wasn't. I know. He looked down. I know now. Then came the second twist. Margaret pulled out a folder. I kept copies. She had saved old messages. Bank transfer records. Emails from my parents. There were messages where my mother specifically told relatives I had chosen to disappear. There were also messages to Ryan explaining that they would keep Rachel's payments coming as long as she believed the money was for the family. My hands shook as I read them. They hadn't simply lied. They had planned it. They had built an entire story around my absence. I looked at Mom. Why? She cried. We were ashamed. Of what? We couldn't admit that we had depended on you. Dad finally spoke. We didn't want people thinking we couldn't provide for our family. I laughed through my tears. So you let them think I abandoned you? Dad lowered his eyes. Yes. For 4 years, I had imagined that maybe my family didn't miss me. I was wrong. They missed my money. That realization hurt more than the original betrayal. But the biggest surprise came when Ryan handed me a check. I stared at it. What is this? Some of what I can repay. I shook my head. You don't owe me. Yes, I do. His voice cracked. I should have asked you. I folded the check and handed it back. Keep it. He looked surprised. I don't want your money. I paused. I wanted my brother. He started crying. So did I. We hugged. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was the first honest moment we'd shared in years. My parents weren't forgiven that day. And they weren't suddenly welcomed back into my life. I told them something before I left. You didn't lose a daughter when I stopped sending money. Dad looked at me. You lost me when you decided my value was measured by what I could give you. Nobody spoke. I walked out. Daniel was waiting for me in the parking lot. He didn't ask what happened. He simply opened the passenger door. I got inside and cried. Not because I wanted my old family back. Because I finally understood why letting them go had hurt so much. I had spent years grieving people who were still alive. Years later, I still have the folder my aunt gave me. Not because I need evidence anymore. Because it reminds me of something important. For 4 years, my parents told everyone I had disappeared. But the truth was much simpler. I hadn't disappeared. I had finally stopped disappearing from my own life. I stopped sending money. I stopped chasing approval. I stopped explaining myself. And when my family finally saw me again, they had to meet the woman I had become without them. Sometimes walking away isn't abandonment. Sometimes it's survival. And sometimes the person your family says they lost is the person who finally found herself.